What is going on, everybody? It's Buddy here. Today I'm going to show you guys how to turn this black, ugly, beat up, faded looking bumper or any black trim on your car and turn it into this beautiful brand new looking bumper. And the best thing about this method, this is going to give you the most durable finish. So you never have to worry about this thing fading out again. It's going to stay like this for many, many years to come. This is the absolute best method. So let's jump right into it. And these are not watermarks. This is not something you can just rub out. I've actually tried scrubbing with a Brillo pad, and I've actually tried a couple different cleaning techniques that I've read online before I came to this. This is ultimately just fading from being in the sun. This is a 20-year-old truck, so this is common. Now all you're going to need here for this job is just some painter's tape. You're going to need some trim and bumper paint. If you guys see my other videos, I absolutely love this stuff. I use it on literally everything. You're going to need some primer. It doesn't need to be automotive primer. It does not need to be sandable either. Just some regular old primer. You can get the cheapest, run-of-the-mill stuff. It's going to work. You're going to need either some plastic wrap. You can honestly use grocery bags. I'm sure you have a big cupboard full of them. And then some 220 sandpaper. So the first thing we're going to do, guys, is we're going to take our tape and we're going to put it right here on the end. Now the reason we do this before we sand, because when we sand, we don't want to mess up our chrome or mess up our paint. So we're going to get this nice and framed out here with our tape. And then be sure to leave a little flap just like this. That way we can stick our plastic in there. Now at this point we're going to be putting the plastic wrapping here on the vehicle. You can see this plastic wrap that you buy here from the store. It's a lot faster, it's a little more efficient, but it's going to be essentially the exact same thing as grocery bags. If you don't feel like spending a couple bucks on this stuff, no problem. You don't need to wrap it up that high. As long as you're not too crazy here with the spray paint, you're not going to get on your car. And if you do, it wipes right off anyways. It's just a fine mist that'll get on there. You can just wipe it off with a microfiber cloth or even a paper towel. You can also see here why we left the little lips here on the tape. We left it halfway peeled up. That way we can slide our plastic right in there. The prep work is nearly done. All we got to do is sand it off, and then we're getting ready to paint. Now at this point, we're going to take our 220 grit sandpaper and we're going to lightly sand the entire bumper. Now you want to make sure you get all the edges, all the cracks, all the crevices, and you don't need to really sand it down. You just need to kind of scuff it up. See how it looks smooth right here? That's all you really need to do. You're not trying to grind anything off. Now if you do have some aggressive fading and almost peeling with this, now then you want to use probably 100 grit. Now we're just going to keep on sanding. Be sure not to push really hard in one spot like this, because then you're just going to grind into one spot. You don't want to do that. You want a nice even layer of sanding. And now you guys can see why it's important, why we actually taped everything off before we started sanding. That way you can get right up to the edges of everything. You don't have to worry about scratching up your paint. You won't have to worry about scratching up your chrome or any other trim you have on your car. Everything's going to be protected, so you can go ahead and sand away. You can do it a lot faster when everything's taped off. You don't have to worry about damaging anything. So now that we're all sanded up, you can see it's pretty uniform here. It's not a big deal if you didn't sand it all the way down. You still have some little marks. That's totally fine. The purpose of sanding is just to make sure that the paint and the primer adhere properly to the bumper. That way it lasts many years to come. So at this point, we're just going to take some soapy water and we're just going to spray it down. If you don't have soap, you can just use water. Just use a quick microfiber cloth and wipe the whole thing down. Now you don't have to worry about scrubbing it clean or everything. Mainly the purpose of this step is just to make sure that you get all the dust off of the bumper. That way it has a nice clean surface so the paint is going to adhere to it properly. And also when you're done getting all of the dust off, you want to give it about 5 minutes just to make sure it's totally dry before we start laying any kind of paint over it. Alright guys, so it's been 5 minutes. It's time to take our primer here. Be sure it is shooken up for about 2 minutes. I just did that before we got on camera here. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're just going to spray it. And this is going to be a real light coat. Don't worry about getting it even. The point of the step is to just get a little bit of primer on there. You never want to cake it on with the first coat, no matter what kind of paint you're doing. So we're going to do this to the entire bumper, and we'll be right back. Now be sure to always wear a mask anytime you're working with any kind of aerosol spray. And also, don't worry if it doesn't look perfect after this step. It's not supposed to look perfect. Again, this step is only to get a little bit of primer here on the bumper. The last thing you want to do on your first coat is cake it on there. So just a nice light coat. It doesn't have to look even. It doesn't have to look pretty. Just get a little bit of paint on there. Alright, as you guys can see, it's already starting to look a whole lot better. Now you can see it's not even. You can see right here is a little bit of spotting. Right here is a little bit of spotting. That's totally fine. There's nothing to worry about. Moving on to our second coat. The second coat is going to be significantly thicker. Don't cake it on. You don't want runs. Runs is when it actually starts dripping down. You don't want that. You got to put a lot of paint on there to do that. This coat is going to be thicker, but not runny thick. So let's get right into it. Now you'll notice when you're spraying, if you do put a little too much, it'll actually have a wet look. You don't really need to put that much paint. You should be spraying it to where it just looks a little bit wet. The purpose of this primer is just to make the trim and bumper paint adhere properly to this. That way you have a nice durable finish. You don't have to worry about making this look pretty. Don't worry about putting a whole lot of paint on it. This is a very important step, but it's not important that it does look pretty. We did put a thicker coat on this time, so instead of the 5 minutes we did first, now we're going to give it about 10 minutes to dry properly. And if you're finding this video helpful, please hit that thumbs up button. I would really appreciate it, guys. Alright, so you can definitely see at this point, it does look a lot more uniform. It does look a lot cleaner. You may have slight blotching like right here, but for the most part, this actually looks really good. And what we're going to be using is our trim and bumper paint at this point. Now, the exact same thing with the primer. You want to make sure you have shooken up for about 2 minutes. And then the first coat is going to be a nice light coat, just like we did the primer. You can see this stuff's a little more dark and a little more rich looking. It does have kind of a semi-gloss look, so it will look a little more wet when you're laying it on, but that's no problem at all. First coat is always the thinnest. Now this stuff dries a good bit slower than our primer, so we're actually going to give this about 10 to 15 minutes. Even though it's our first coat, it is our real thin coat. Now the main step to getting a nice clean finish, this is more important than the primer. We're actually trying to make it look decent here. We're going to make sure that the can is always moving when we're pushing down on the nozzle. Anytime there's paint coming out of the can, you want to make sure that you are moving. You don't want to stay in one spot and spray, because that will cause runs and uneven paint. It's really not that hard. You can practice on a piece of cardboard if you want. Once you get it down, it's just like riding a bike. Now also an important thing to note, you can see it is wet and it almost has like a sandblasted look. Bumpers and trim usually do have a sandblasted look. They have a little bit of almost an aggressive feel to them, almost like sandpaper. Now, if you want it to be super smooth, what you can do is you can wet sand right after the second coat of primer. You want to make sure the primer does dry for at least an hour before you wet sand. I do have a video on wet sanding. If you wanted to have a super smooth finish, I don't think it looks good on trim, but everybody's a little different. I will put a video right here in this little white card. You can click on it. It's actually a video where I painted my BMW's roof and I wet sanded it. I use this exact same method almost. The wet sanding is going to make sure you get a nice smooth finish. It's essentially just water and high grit sandpaper. Everything is in the video that you need to know if you want to go ahead and do that. I personally like the sandblasted look, so we're going to keep going. It's been about 10 minutes, so we're going to go right on to our second coat of paint. Now, with our second coat of this trim and bumper paint, this is going to be substantially thicker. Now, I'm going to spray here so you guys can see it. You want it to look wet. See how that looks wet? And don't worry about these little tiny, almost pinhole looks in there. Those are going to dry out. It's going to dry real even. That's about as wet as you want to get it. You want to get it to where it's just wet. You don't want to make it soaking wet till it's actually dripping. So we're going to do the entire thing like this and make sure our can is always moving. See how it's nice and wet and even looking? That's exactly what you want. It almost looks a little more bumpy here on the camera. It's just the light's hitting it kind of funny. But that's essentially what you want, and when it dries, it's going to be absolutely beautiful. So let me get the camera out of the way, and we'll spray this bumper with our last step. Now, I usually do 3 coats of this stuff anytime I'm painting anything. I'm actually about to sell this car. This is going to be a quick flip here for me on this car. I'm going to make a good bit of money. I'm going to have a video on how to flip cars, how to find them, and how to fix them up. Obviously, my channel is a DIY channel, but there's going to be a couple of cool videos on the cars I flip and the money I make doing this. Link will be in the description. So we're only doing 2 coats of this stuff here. Now, you can notice here that I am a little bit closer. Now, I am spraying it closer so I can get it a little more thick on there. You definitely don't want to get too close. You kind of want to start far away and then go in closer and closer. You find that sweet spot. But definitely just take your time. Try it out on a piece of cardboard first before you start spraying your car down. Alright guys, so it's been about 30 minutes. Now, how to tell if it's dry enough to take the tape off? Instead of touching this, what you want to touch is right here. It's not leaving any marks when I touch right here. That means if I do touch right here accidentally, it's not going to do anything. And if it does kind of stick to your finger and it kind of leaves a mark, don't take it off yet, leave it on there. So it looks like it's ready to go. Let's take the tape off of it and show you the final product. And some of you may have noticed I am wearing slippers. These are steel toe spec work slippers here. I do want to make sure everybody knows that. I always follow safety regulations, and definitely make sure you do the same. And also, you should highly consider hitting the subscribe button and the little thumbs up button under this video. Alright, we're officially done, so it's time to take a closer look at the finished result. And it is looking beautiful here. Let me see if I can get closer here for you. So it does have that sandblasted look, and that came out great. I'm real stoked with it. See if I can get a better angle here for you guys. Yeah, it looks absolutely flawless. It literally looks like a brand new factory bumper. And as always, be sure to hit the little thumbs up button here under the video. It really helps me out more than you guys know. And also definitely consider subscribing. I got some pretty cool videos here up on the screen that you guys will probably like. So definitely check my channel out and see if it's something for you. Until then, have a good one, guys.